I'm going to make a presentation about the Arab League and the market trends for the walnuts for this webinar called Exponut 2020. It's very important to highlight the full region for the consumption of walnuts, because we have been getting a growing since 2009 when we make the first activities in Gulf. And also I'm going to focus on the GCC market and to highlight Dubai as a hub and which are the trends and opportunities for 2021. It's very important to understand the region. Dubai is the hub where is all the logistic, all the traders that are distributing the walnuts. This area, it's called Minasa. We consider Pakistan and India in our perspective, because there are a lot of traders that are based in India and based in UAE, and they distribute to India and Pakistan. And at the same time, we have many visitors to our show or our activities, exporters going from Morocco to UAE. But we usually focus and we review all our analysis with the 22 countries of the Arab League that are the 22 Arab speakers countries of the region. When we see this region, well, it's a region that has 492 millions, the 22 countries. But when we consider India and Pakistan, we're talking about a community of around 2,000, 2,000 million people. In terms of the country that has more population, well, it is Egypt, Iran, where some of our walnuts are going. But when we see the GDP, is where we see the oil producer countries, Saudi and UAE. This young population that is growing very fast, because there is they're Muslim do not control the bone of kids, and we're talking about an economy of 3,000 millions dollars. But GCC, it's always the first focus. These are mainly oil countries that were having and performing always very well, but of course now because of COVID, all these projections of 2020 growing on GDP are actually -4 now percentage of GDP, and the rebound, I mean, it's starting to happen, and we will see also what happened with the walnuts during 2020. And where we're located is in UAE. Dubai is where most of the traders of walnuts and dry fruits are located. It's where the Gulf Food happen. It's where the office is located. And it's a small country, UAE. There are just 10 millions, but has high GDP per capita. But when we see imports, they are definitely a half, and there is the reason because many importers are trading from here to Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, India, in terms of the dry fruit. Dubai is a hub. It's also a logistic hub. Of course, now affected by the COVID. We used to have 300 flights to different cities. Now it's just around 100. Now the cargo has been the main task of these airlines located in the GCC, mainly because this is an area that do not produce food. So all the food that is ready to eat, like walnuts or any other fruits that are ready to consume, are distributed or processed, are highly demanded in this market. As I was mentioned, the Arab League is a big importer of food because they don't produce. So that's open a big opportunity for ingredients. And what we understand for this strategy as an ingredient is all products that either can be processed or cracked, like the walnuts, or any other product like meat powder that can be processed. At the end, what the Arabs like is to import raw materials, added value in this area, and they create their own brand and they distribute, getting some value. and being also traders. The Muslim is a big community, not just in this area. It's always extend to Asia and Europe. And the most important is like, well, do not apply for walnut, but the halal consumption, it on the grow, and we always also highlight that element as part of the strategy of our office. How has been the evolution of the food items to the Arab League in growing from almost 150 million to 55 millions in 29. We are going to have most probably around 300 millions for 2020. And the walnut is the number one product of the food. In that, it's important to mention that it's walnut in shell. As mentioned, it's because here they crack and they will distribute to be cracked even in other markets. Now talking more about the dry fruit. There is a very specialized dry fruit market called Al Ras in Dubai. This is a picture of how was closed the market for the COVID-19. That affected, of course, because unfortunately the lockdown was very close to one of the dates that all the importers plan for the Ramadan chapter, for the Ramadan month. But we saw a recovery in the last period of the year. Since August onward, start to pick up. So that's good because we show some recovery. At the beginning, we were very affected. So I think we're going to end the year on around $40 million of exports of walnuts. This is the statistics and the pictures up to October 2020. If we see the full Arab League, we're talking about $37 million of export of walnuts. 99 was an amazing year with almost $44 million of export to UAE. And Morocco also is showing a very steady growing since they reduced the tariff in 2015. Other countries, there is potential to grow. Of course, it's very sensitive to this year, to the Ramadan, so that's why the other countries that was growing also got some reduction. But countries like Kuwait or Saudi, we see that there are more opportunities to keep growing. And if we focus on UAE, well, you see here we compete always with the United States. There is an off-season northern hemisphere against southern hemisphere. Both we are growing, and that the reason of this is because Dubai and the traders are getting very well positioned, and Dubai in that is quite smart into develop very well the logistics and allow the companies to establish and distribute from here to the rest of the Middle East. And most of these walnuts from the US and from Chile are not consumed in UAE. Mainly are distributed to Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, mainly because that countries has still tariffs and thanks to distribution coming from Dubai, some formal, some informal, they can arrive with a more competitive price. In terms of trends, yeah, the COVID created a good path for increasing the consumption of healthy products, and in that we see definitely opportunities to keep the growing of the walnuts and more other items that I'm showing here. The idea is now the consumers will focus more on on foods that increase the immune system, that has more vitamins, and that walnut has a lot of benefits. Another trend post-COVID is e-commerce, cashless payments, and companies will focus more on will be more loyal on brands because e-commerce using machine learning will propose the same brands or the same path of growing of purchasing. So that's it's mainly the reason why we see that that is going to be how the consumer is going to react. Just to keep our work in UAE during this pandemic, we decided to do a PR and social media campaign highlighting which are the elements that differentiate our walnut from the rest of the world, mainly in terms of quality. So we design in PR and in social media a very interesting campaign. We got very good results in terms of publishing and in terms also of social media. So I just want to show we will be continuing doing this path because we see that we can educate and also we can get a lot of traction. And the good thing is like we did it in English and in Arabic. So this is very important because there are a lot of importers in the neighbor countries that just speak Arabic. So this part of the media in very well-known food and beverage magazines and newspapers. So coming to e-commerce, we're developing a strategy for the B2B. We're working with the platform called TradeLink. We see that in the future, we will encourage some of our exporters to go and try to sell into the retail format. We usually try to, of course, first focus on what is giving us good result, that is in bulk, in bags, export of in-shell walnuts. But we see that here we are going to have an opportunity to arrive to the buyer without the need of an importer or a packer. So we just need to comply with the local regulations, Arab stickers, and some other registrations into the municipality, and we can go straight to some retailers or to some hotels. Also, we did a poll to our importers. The idea is to know how they feel for the future of 2021. Most of them are quite positive. They say that they will buy walnuts from Chile, and they want us to bring good and big and good exporters. They know that Chile has the best nut in the world, so that's very good to know. In terms of Gulfood, we will have a show at Gulfood. We will have a small pavilion this year just to keep our presence. There are already some health restrictions that we will follow in terms of space and social distancing. This is how you can see. They just request PCR as a test to come to UAE. So far, it's feasible to come. So we expect to have at least 8 companies during that. Another important event that we will have, and I want to also highlight that we will showcase the walnuts in the food security area of our pavilion at Expo. We're going to show during October 2021 to March 2022 the qualities of our foods, and walnut is one of them. This is a short video about the Al Ras market. The idea is just to show a market that most of you guys most probably knows. We did this video yesterday for a racing seminar also. And you will see some names of importers that we usually know, that are very familiar with you. There you saw, for example, some Frunat brand. There are Lorex Bexadi is one importer that will be in the Exponut roundtable meetings. So that's the other importer, CKM, that is most probably well known for you guys. So this was just to end this seminar. So I would like to thank to Exponut for inviting me, and now I will give the floor to my colleague Diego, who is going to talk about the German market.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for that fine presentation. Good morning, everybody. My name is Diego Torres, as Carlos just mentioned. I am the director of ProChile here in Germany. It's a pleasure to address you here today. Thank you very much to Chilenut for the invitation. I'll be presenting about the German nut market. And to start things off, I wanted to give you a little bit about a little context about what is the situation currently here today in Germany. As some of you may know, we are currently in the second wave of the COVID pandemic, and hence the German economy is expected to shrink by around 8% this year, and it's expected to grow next year by around 5.1%. There have been several different economic recovery packages being announced by the German government, the largest around 130 billion euros, several tax assistance acts, the lowering of the tax in terms of for sales, family bonuses, reduction in social securities, and so on. Today, the cases are around 140 cases per 100,000 inhabitants, which is quite high compared to the figures during the first wave. And there's currently a sort of suggested lockdown, which affects primarily the Horeca channel, and this quarantine is in effect until December 5th. When it comes to the Chilean and German trade relationship, it has been steadily throughout the last couple of years around $4 billion with a trade balance in favor of Germany. Our exports to Germany have always been somewhere around $1 billion. Something important to highlight that for the first time in 2019, the export basket, which Chile exports to Germany, was composed for the first time. More than 60% was non-copper. So copper is lowering somehow its participation in our export basket to Germany, and that's in fact is a very good news for us. This is our current export basket, leaving outside, of course, the copper, and you can see that the nuts have grown exponentially, I would say, for the last 4 to 5 years. Today, it's our second non-copper export to the market, reaching a high of $65 million back in 2018, lowering a little bit to 2019. But you can see that the increase for the last almost 7 years is more than 100% from 2013 to today. So a product which has definitely gained a lot of market participation in the German market, and of course, which we are trying to promote very, very strongly. The German retail is perhaps one of the most competitive retail industries in Europe and maybe even in the world. German consumers are very stingy, I would say. There is even, you can say there in the yellow box, there was a very well-known advertisement from a retail chain that said, "Guys is geil," which basically means cheap is good. There's a constant price war amongst retailers. They have very high bargaining power, and there's a great segmentation, especially when it comes for the nut products. Nuts are present practically in discount chains, in traditional supermarkets, in druggery, in bio supermarkets, in wholesales. So it's a product which can have a lot of market penetration in different sales areas. With a very high population, around 83 million people, the Germans on average only spend about 10% of their income on foods. That's something very important to consider. Here, a closer look at the German retail. You can see that around almost 50, maybe even a little bit more, 50% of the German retail industry is basically concentrated within 4 groups: the Edeka, the Lidl, Penny, and Aldi groups, with, of course, basically 90% of all of the retail stores present in the market. So those are the 4 main players. Chilenut are present basically in all 4 of them, very strongly. When it comes to the Chilenut, it's probably one of the 2 products currently present in the German market with an indication of origin. You can see there the first picture on the top left, that's walnuts aus Chile. It is indicated. Together with wine, nuts are probably the only 2 products in which in German retail are identified with Chile directly, and which is seen by the German industry and the German consumer as a added value product, so to say. The Chilean nut is perceived as a high quality nut, as a fairly priced nut, and hence importers and distributors and retailers tend of course, to price it a little bit higher, given the fact that the consumer, of course, perceived it as better quality. When it comes to the Chilean, excuse me, to the dried fruits exports, we can see there that, of course, we export not only nuts, but also hazelnut, almonds, and dried plums. Nuts, of course, amount to $60 million, as I've already said, with a short decline during 2019. We expect that even with the pandemic throughout this year, nut exports consumption will increase, and hence also we will see a slight increase in Chilean nut exports to the market. Now, when it comes to the dry fruit consumption in Germany, it has been a very particular year, of course, like it has been in all the countries around the world. Nut consumption, we could see during the first semester of this year that it increased, basically because of hamster purchases. People were working from home, were going to the retail chains remained open throughout the first semester. And we could see that consumption of dried fruit products basically increased. However, after the European summer, this consumption decreased again to normal levels. We can see throughout the last years that in fact the consumption per capita has decreased for around 900 grams per person. However, the prices have increased, the spending has increased, and in fact, different tendencies say that by 2025, we expect that the average spending per capita will be somewhere around 30 euros per person. Now, a very important issue to highlight is what's going to happen. How is the pandemic going to affect German consumer habits? This is a very strong issue currently here in Germany. The pandemic has accelerated certain tendencies here in Germany. The German market, when it comes to food spendings and food consumer habits, has always been somehow at the frontier of regional consumption, of sustainable consumptions when it comes to food products. And we can see in certain surveys that the pandemic has somehow accelerated this consumer and has of course increased the amount of consumers which are focusing more on these kinds of elements. Here we see that throughout Europe, there is a very large percentage of the population which is still pessimistic and unsure when it comes to their country's recovery. In the specific case of Germany, we're talking of somewhere around 85% of the population are unsure or very pessimistic when it comes to the economic recovery of the country. That is something very important to take into consideration, especially considering that it will affect one way or another the consumer habits, the decision making of consumers when it comes to consumption of their foods. These changes in consumer habits will not be a one-time thing throughout this year. Some of these changes, some of these habits will definitely stay in a society which has been known somehow to shift very slowly when it comes to consumer tendencies. Here we can see, for example, that up to 40% of the consumers say they will decrease spending. Many of them 20% of Germans will shift their consumer channels to online, which is a very large portion when it comes to the German market, a market which has been very traditional in their channels of consumption for foods. 50% of Germans, 1 every 2 Germans, is changing the stores or the brands which they consumed before the pandemic, and they will keep doing this after the pandemic. 62% of them are not yet reassuming normal, so to say, out of home activities, of course. So we can still see that somehow, even after this year, some Germans are not consuming the way they used to. And you can see this graph is very important. What are Germans thinking when they go to the supermarket, to the retail stores at the moment of buying or not dry fruit or nuts? The Germans are becoming much more mindful as to where they spend their money. They're not going to their local supermarket, to the corner supermarket anymore. They're trying to search online. They're trying to do research and seeing where can they spend less money, where can they be more efficient when spending money. They also are taking into consideration the retail stores, the establishment, the corona, the sanitary measures that those supermarkets are currently implementing. So it's very important that these kind of elements are taken into consideration to see how the market is currently changing. And you can see it here. Consumers' intention to continue using new channels definitely will stay. In-store self-checkouts, purchase directly from social media, grocery delivery. These were channels of consumption which prior to the pandemic were not as high, so to say, or as important within the radar of the German consumer. So definitely new channels are rising, and those are expected to continue to be growing after the COVID. Now, the elements, as I mentioned earlier, that the German consumer takes into consideration has always been related to sustainable products, and this has grown very large during the pandemic. We can see that basically between 90 and 95% of German consumers today take into account the sustainable and eco-friendly aspects of the products they consume. This is extremely important, which also goes in line with certain government proposals or bills, project of laws being discussed within the European Union in terms of, making sure that the products which are available for their German consumers are in fact sustainable throughout the whole supply chain of production. Healthy and hygienic packaging are becoming more important, and the retailers are considering this. So the retailers today are doing promotions of regional consumption of regional products. You can see it in the entrance of many retail stores that you go inside, and the first products being advertised are the local products, and consumers are valuing this, and they are of course consuming and liking and preferring those establishments. So company purposes and values comes into play. And of course, Chile being an overseas exporter needs to somehow take these elements into consideration when offering their products to the German market. To end up, like my colleague Carlos mentioned the different activities, I just want to mention the most important which will be taking part throughout next year, which is of course Anuga, which takes place during the month of October in Köln. Chile has always been present there for many, many years now. We will be there present again for sure this year, next year. And of course, one of the highlights of our presence there are our dried fruit exporters and producers, which compose to around, I would say, maybe between 50 and 60% of the companies which comes usually with us. That's all around. All in all, we're talking about around 60 companies which are always present with ProChile in the Chilean pavilion. So I'd like to end up with inviting you to visit us, visit the pavilion, get in contact with ProChile, with Chilenut. If you require any information or business contacts from the Chilean nut industry. And I wish you all a very good closing of year, and hopefully we can all meet next year back in 2021. Thank you very much.